Have you ever watched a show or movie and thought, well, what the hell was that about? Well, grab yourself some popcorn because we have just the podcast for you. Welcome back to Cheap Pop, where my friend Matt and I try to take a film, television show, or video game, maybe don't quote me on that, break it down, flip it in, reverse it while giving you our insights, our analysis, and some interesting facts and tidbits you might not have known. Or if you did know, we don't really care. That's fine. I'm Derek, and today we are going to be talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 24, The Last Cometh. Matt, how are you doing, first of all?
Good. This episode finally started giving me a little bit more of what I was looking for. We're getting some new stuff finally, rather than these revelations of things that I feel like we've already got most of our info on. So
Yeah.
It's nice. I feel like our story's finally progressing again. After we had the whole awakening of Unit 1, it's been like
It went a little quiet, yeah.
backtrack almost. So I like where we're at right now. I'm excited for the next two episodes for sure. Two? Yeah.
Yep, we got two left after this. Yeah, so this episode originally aired in March of 1996, March 13th specifically. And we open up with kind of a bookend for Asuka's, I guess, collapse at this point. We open with Asuka basically as a young girl rushing home. You can tell by kind of the way the scene is colorized. Like this is like a obviously far-reaching flashback and everything. We're seeing this kind of like as it is, kind of distorted a little bit in her memory. And she's rushing through the door and she's so excited trying to share some news with her mother, basically that she has been accepted into this Evangelion program, what'll end up becoming the Evangelion program. And she's just so excited, can't wait to share it with her. And it keeps looping this animation of running through the door, and then it loops back, and she like what she's saying is changing, but we keep doing the door thing. So by the time we actually see what's on the other side of the door, you're like, oh, this is not going to be good. This is going to be very, very bad. She rushes through the door to find her mother's hanging body. Her mother has unalived herself, as they would say now. And again, Asuka's 5 at this point. And she was so excited, not just for the excitement of getting into the program and feeling like she's going to do something that really matters. Again, her mom heavily involved with Nerve, we know. So it's kind of like moving within the same vein as what her mom does, but kind of her way of contributing to it. She's talking about not feeling alone, having friends, having people that actually care about her, all of this. And then to walk in the door and see that has to be utterly debilitating to a child, to just no ability to comprehend that. And we know that she never even comes close to coping with that. So we're pretty much seeing like the final piece to the backstory of Asuka. That's like, oh, okay. So there's a reason you are the way that you are. And that has some ramifications moving forward. What did you think of this just kind of opening? Like that's a lot to take in, but it almost felt like something maybe they didn't have room for earlier in like the episode of her breakdown, and kind of circled back was my thought.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it doesn't really play into the episode to what I remember. I mean, I guess the first part we kind of get into Asuka, but it's like it seems very out of place. Like, oh, we had a couple minutes left from the last episode we forgot to show you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that looping kind of animation definitely seems like something we've seen a number of different times with a lot of like Shinji's vision specifically. But yeah, I think it's just like, oh, I'm not going to be lonely anymore. Hanging body. It's like, oh boy, sorry, you're going to be just a little bit more lonely now.
Yeah. And I kind of get the feeling that it's like after everything that the angel like dredged up about her like past, all these repressed memories, things she said herself she doesn't want to remember anymore. I kind of feel like maybe this is one of those things that wasn't dragged to the surface, but because all of her interior walls have been kind of torn down, she can't really hold it at bay, because we move out of that to her exploding in anger at Shinji at Misato's apartment. You see like this hot coffee pot is knocked down, and she's yelling at him for making up a lie about Mr. Kaji. And Shinji kind of out of character, actually like yells back at her like, how many times do I have to tell you Mr. Kaji is gone, damn it? And you're just like, oh wow, Shinji actually like biting back. That doesn't happen. I don't know. It didn't show it if he was burned by the coffee, but I feel like it kind of is implied that way. Maybe that's why he has the extra heat of irritation, that or he's just at his own breaking point. And yeah, she's kind of forced to finally confront Mr. Kaji, which I think that might be why that memory kind of surfaced. Is it was sort of like Mr. Kaji sort of represented this last thread of her sense of hope about mattering to someone, finding happiness in some way, and now learning that he's dead. It's kind of like bringing it back to the last time she felt a sense of true hope, that being accepted into this program and going to proudly share this moment with her mother. And it's like, now that I put it that way, I actually feel like that's exactly what it's trying to do, to mirror it that way. Just like you had the destruction of the child, now you have the destruction of the young woman in this case. And she goes into a total, complete spiral now, like no will to live.
Well, and she, like, even in the way she's drawn at this point, like, after that conversation with Shinji, she doesn't look the same. She looks like a young woman as opposed to like a child, which is how she's been portrayed before. And it's not just in like, she looks defeated, like artistically, she looks a lot older. And I think that's really signifying like that is the last moment of her being a child. Like now she's fully accepted, like life is not, we've had a number of things that have already led her in that direction, but she's pushed off those feelings so much and just been like, no, I'm going to fight through it. I'm going to fight through it. I'm still a kid. All these things, but like Kaji's, the loss of Kaji for her is like, I think really the last thing she was holding on to, like that form of innocence. And once that's broken, like that just goes even more into her mental breakdown is like, nope, I'm not this kid anymore, but I am, this broken adult that I am now. But and it feels kind of like, just with normal life, it's, when you finally realize what adulthood is versus what you had, like, in school, it's a loss that everybody takes, but she's taking it at a much more intense level with the loss of people rather than just the loss of
innocence, if you will.
Things used to be.
Yeah, for sure. And they kind of do this with several of the kids. I think even you could say all the kids, as the show goes on, they really kind of age them up a little bit as far as how they're animated, how they appear. It's kind of like the anxiety and just stress of it has just aged them, and they don't look like kids anymore, even though they should be. And again, you're at like that 14, 15 range, you're starting to kind of transition into a young adult. And so the last little bits of that childhood and youthful, like true youthfulness, kind of start to slip away a little bit. But I think it's just more exaggerated here because of everything they're going through. And after that argument with Shinji, we basically smash cut to Asuka in like an abandoned building, lying naked in a tub. And she's just staring blankly up at the sky. Her cheeks are sunken. And you're just like, whoa, okay, what's going on? And we end up coming to find that, all right, she's been gone for like a week. Like she just left. And even though she's got all her clothes neatly folded or whatever in the corner over there, like she's basically just laying there with no will to live and just waiting to die. It's like she doesn't even have... It's like for her, she doesn't want to be alive anymore. But it's like even the act of unaliving oneself still requires motivation she doesn't even have anymore. She just does not care. And it's like this last thread has broken, and now she's just laying there waiting to die. And after a week, people from Nerve finally find her. And, we then jump from that to Misato and Glasses kind of talking about like, oh, the team found her. The Intel Section 2 finally found Asuka. And Misato's just like, it took them a week to find her. And like, she didn't even go that far. Like she was still within the city, and she kind of comments like, well, that's not like them. And they're just like talking about it like it was like, oh, maybe they're just trying to stick it to operations or something. And the whole time I'm just thinking like, my God, Misato, like, could you have less empathy in your voice? Like hearing that like she ran away, has been gone for a week. They found her in the state they found her in, and you're just like, those guys are just really trying to, stick it to us a little bit. Like it's just so bizarre. Like her care for Asuka seems like very negligible at this point to me.
Yeah, I felt like she, we kind of discussed a little bit before that where they just write it off like, oh, they're trying to, stick it to us for us acting a certain way. But the first thing she says seems like there's an intention behind it. Like, oh, there's a reason they didn't get to her in this amount of time. And I did kind of wonder in that moment is like, is that a Gendo played? Is he using that to his advantage somehow? Because I do think everything from him is a calculated effort. And with how she talks about, with how Masato talks about this group, what is it called again?
She references it as Intel Section 2. I just think it's Intel, and it's just this particular section. Like I think about like the city sectioned off, like this particular Section 2 is who found her, but it's just intelligence.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that was, if I remember correctly, that was the same group she was talking to when Fitsuki was kidnapped, and
I think so. Yeah,
was in custody, if I remember correctly.
I believe so.
So yeah, at this point, I'm just kind of wondering, like, is there some other meaning behind it? But I don't really get that from the rest of the
Yeah. She definitely thinks it's significant because Asuka's replacement, the fifth children, is apparently arriving that day. So it's almost like they used her being absent maybe as a way of like expediting the process. Like, oh, see, we got to get this one going. Something could happen any day now. And so like they didn't really search for her until then. That's kind of what I got from it. I wanted to circle back real quick. I skipped over Asuka's quote when she's laying in the tub. It's all internal dialogue. But she says, sync rate 0, no longer qualified to be second children. There's no reason for me to be here. No one ever even sees me anymore. Dad, mom, no one at all. There's no reason left for me to live. And it's just like,
God, that's so depressing.
Yeah, it's like that pretty well encompasses a total and complete collapse of like the spirit and everything. Like there's nothing left. Like I said, she didn't even have the motivation to like facilitate what she's essentially wanting to ultimately happen. It's just like, man, when you're at that level, I don't know what you come back from. And I guess that's the point, is you really don't. But Unit 2 is out of her hands. The fifth children is set to arrive that day. And that's got to be challenging. So back in his room, Shinji, as always, is staring at a ceiling. He's always staring up at a ceiling, or he's sitting on a train, it feels like. He's staring up at a ceiling, and he's just trying to kind of process everything, which you got to think too, like everyone is in a total state of like just disorganization and like emotionally strung out at this point. Like it's been a little bit easy, I think, to be frustrated at times with Shinji in recent episodes. But at the same time, when you consider like the last episode and its revelations for him, like where that would put his headspace at, and they do kind of get into that a little bit. Because like, yeah, he's thinking about like all the rays and the chamber where the dummy plugs are, Ray 3 at the hospital, and he's kind of like, yeah, he even notices like, oh, okay, so what I experienced in the direct sea was in fact my mother's presence. And so he's just kind of wondering like, what the is Gendo doing with Ray and with my mom? Like that's a very troubling thing to have to consider. And later on, he kind of gets into this idea of like, well, who can I talk to at this point? Like, I literally don't know Ray 3. And even if I felt like it was still Ray 2, what I know of her now, how do I approach her or talk with her? Misato is completely like gone. Like she's always basically like held up in her room where she's not there because she's investigating stuff. Asuka's totally broken and gone. It's just like there is no one for him to turn to in this case. And it's just that isolation amid like tremendous emotional turmoil,
Yeah, so he kind of talks about the realization of his mom. Then we finally get the confirmation on the cat. Boy, was I breathing heavy, just like, oh man, is it her cat? Is it not her cat? But we did confirm that's her cat, so that makes sense of why she was like more emotional about it than just, thinking about it like, oh, my grandma's cat died. But
Yeah.
then we get into the whole Gendo Risuko conversation, where we finally get the acknowledgement that Risuko and Gendo have been
Told you.
down. So
Told you.
yeah, and this is where the subs and the dubs differ quite a bit. There is a line where it spells it out for you, but really with the subs, it's pretty detailed.
I have the line. I think the one you're referencing. So Gendo first asks why she destroyed the dummy plug system. She corrects that she didn't destroy the dummy system. She destroyed Ray, which is, again, if Ray the Third dies, there will be no more Rays. So that was the clarification before we jumped on this. Like after last episode, I'd mentioned to you, I was like, ooh, I had that wrong, actually. I think I made a definitive statement that was incorrect. But the Gendo repeats that question, like why she destroyed the system. And Risuko says, because I no longer feel any joy in your embrace. Why don't you do what you want with me? The caption to this says, why don't you have your way with my body, just like you did before? Is that the quote you were...
Yeah, and then there's another one, I think she says, because having you make love to me doesn't make me happy anymore.
Yes.
And it's like, well, that settles it. They're definitely, they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And at this point I wrote, yep, she's a clone of her mom. 100% she's a clone. I'm team clone.
Okay.
You can't sway me.
Yep. All right. So Gendo ends this conversation just telling her how disappointed he is in her. And she's just like floored by this, almost like he just had the audacity to use that word. She's like, what? Like, you've never expected much of me, never placed any hope in me, not once. You wanted nothing from me, nothing, not a damn thing. And then she just breaks down into tears, and Gendo's just like, well, my job here is done. And just walks out of the room. And just like in every scene he's in, you're just like, God, what an ass. Like, just unmitigated, like ridiculous, the audacity of this man who just chews up people's like lives and like their well-being and just completely like spits it out, like has no regard for anybody. And that kind of encompasses him, even though, yes, he does have his own pain and stuff that he carries. It's just like, yeah, but he steps on people along the way. And I think in both the case of Risuko's mother and Risuko, those weren't like a fair, maybe like you could say in like some like more like primal urge way, like, okay, yeah, it's an outlet for him for, instinctual needs, but it's really more just like, yeah, the reason it was those specific women and not just like a prostitute or something is because Gendo is like, oh, you can be useful to me, and if I follow through with this because I know both of you have interest in me, then I can further leverage your trust and compliance for whatever I need. Like, he's just manipulating them and using them. And I think that was the whole thing. Yeah. And I think that was the whole thing with like when Risuko's mother kisses him, he's not really reciprocating it. He's kind of just like, bitch, I'm done with you. The Magi is like created, like, get off me. And he ends up rejecting her. And then the little Ray goes and basically tells her exactly what Gendo actually thinks of her. So yeah, I think absolutely he's just like, yeah, you're not really useful to me. And that's why he sent Risuko to go stand before the council and go be the scapegoat, basically pin all of the blame for losing the Spear of Longinus and how Nerve has been running. He sent her to be the sacrificial lamb. And that's another thing I had misconstrued last episode. I thought they were musing, hey, maybe we should make Gendo our sacrificial lamb. And it's like, no, they're saying Gendo did this to Risuko. And so that's why she angrily takes out Ray, because Ray should have been the one to face whatever consequences. And I don't really know that makes a lot of sense either, but I think because we know Gendo sent her instead, it's just kind of like, well, you're going to be the one to bear the wrath of this because Gendo won't go do it, and he's not going to let them see Ray because he doesn't want them to really scrutinize what's going on there or try to, contain her, arrest her, whatever. So yeah, I think at that point it's just like, yep, all trust is gone here, and I mean nothing to this person who I've been very obedient and loving to, even when it made no sense. Like, she bore any humiliation, any insult, whatever, and put up with it. And it was all, to him, it was just like, yeah, you were useful, so I kept you around. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this next scene we have here, we get to a conversation about Toji and Kinsuke, which Toji still alive.
Told you.
I think the storyboard's full of shit. Because he talks about them having a new home, they moved away, that Shinji no longer has any friends.
Yep.
And, you know, he's getting his twitchy hand back, just like he always does.
Twitchy hand will come into play.
There's a lot of weird hand shit going on in this episode.
It gets weirder.
So we got our new player now, and immediately I think, you know, he's the hot guy, right?
Kaoru, yeah.
But damn, look at this boy right here. He's the hot guy for sure. And Shinji is blushing like
he
a mofo.
is smitten.
Yeah, you thought that there was ever any chemistry with him and Asuka. Boy, he is struggling to even look at this kid.
Yep.
So this is Kaoru, and we get this background information conversation on him, and this is about him being deleted from the system, just like Rei. Date of birth is also the second impact, and we figure out that he's sent directly by the council.
Yeah.
So
no pretense or whatever of the Marduk Institute, which has always been the thing. So it's just another thing where it's just like, yeah, we're not really playing with this anymore. I also love when Kaoru first comes on screen, he's humming Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And when Shinji's almost just like, what, who are you? Kaoru's like, music, Lillian's greatest achievement. I'm like, yep, he's an angel. Yep, he's not human. I was like, who talks like that? And Shinji doesn't even know what Lillian means. Like, that's such a confusing thing to just say. So, like, if they're going to try and play this as a swerve later, it's not a very good swerve. Like, he's basically up front putting the cards down. Like, yep, I'm basically spelling out what I am. So
we've never had any conversation about Lilith to this point either. And then it's just like, hey, by the way, there's 3 episodes left.
Yeah.
Lilith is now part of the game.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, man, geez, why are we not pacing this correct? I'm like, yeah, I feel like now we're getting to the point where, you know, we've got so much stuff to still talk about, and we don't have enough time to do it.
Yep, I agree. And in subsequent supplemental research and stuff that I've done, I've actually learned a bit about the actual like production process of the series, and it is enlightening for some of this stuff. It's like they basically had the middle chunk that was pretty well ironed out. The first 6 episodes were rewritten like crazy, where they'd get several episodes in and then basically double all the way back to like the middle of the first episode or the start of the second episode and rewrite those first 6. It was basically like through episode 19, they had a crisp outline that Anno felt really good about. And then after that, he said the production process, not that they weren't doing good work, but the process that allowed it to be as tight and efficient as it had been, because of time constraints, not budget constraints, but time constraints, kind of went off the rail a little bit, you know, like they basically, and I think that's why some of these huge revelations start hitting towards the end. And you're just like, what the hell? We didn't foreshadow that. We talked about that. Like, if you had taken breadcrumbs and kind of left a trail leading up to it, it wouldn't feel like a blindside out of nowhere. And that's in large part because of that. The process kind of got wild and loose. And so even when you have awesome ideas and revelations, they weren't really able to be built up to their fullest potential, I think.
So you're just focusing too much on rewrites and then ran out of time.
Yeah. Basically, like, for the length of time with his process, the way he did it, because again, it's his animation studio that did Evangelion. They had basically, for the amount of time they had, he had a script and a process that was going to produce about 20 episodes, and the show was for 26. And so it kind of left a little bit of scrambling. He actually, circling back still to episode 1, we liked episode 1 a fair bit. We felt like it accomplished a lot for like setting the stage. He actually feels like episode 1 was a failure because he feels like the process, the theme it settled on was this notion of like, don't run away, basically Shinji confronting this. But I do feel like that's prevalent for Shinji's character throughout the series. So I need to read more into that. That was curious, but I was like, okay, well, this is episode 1. I'm going to focus on the stuff that's like that 19 to 20, whatever, where we are now, Yeah. But I thought that was interesting. I would be fascinated to learn more about him and his mindset through all of this stuff. But yeah, so big revelations coming in here. Lilith coming in episode, like the very end reveal here is ridiculous, but we're a little bit jumping the gun here. So Kaoru and Shinji are hitting it off. Kaoru is laying it on thick with the warmth and the charm, and he has Shinji just all kinds of flustered. Even when people have been nice to Shinji, which is very sparse and rare, like all Shinji really wants is someone to actually be kind to him and make him feel like he matters, like he's worthy or whatever. Kaoru is not only doing all of that, but Shinji's actually not even like blushing and looking away. Like think about times in the past when people would compliment Shinji, he would almost be uncomfortable with the compliment. Like he couldn't handle it. With Kaoru, he's like, not only, he's blushing, but like he's still like fixating on Kaoru. Like he's looking directly at him. It's not like when he's like, oh, hey man, you're like a natural, you're like a prodigy when it comes to synchronization rates and everything like that. Like Shinji, he had a boost of confidence from it, but he even kind of admitted later on, like he doesn't like when people praise him because he doesn't know how to handle it. And now here's Kaoru basically acting like he's the greatest thing ever, like to his face, practically laying on the charm. And Shinji's just like, oh, no, keep going. I like this. Keep talking. Like he's all into it.
The second this happened, and we have already got the Lilin comment, I was like, all right, well, he's an angel. That's pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. And angels have to be mixed with somebody else. So I'm going with Gendo if he's so receptive and like horny over this dude, because Shinji just wants to have sex with his parents. I think that's the repeating theme, is that he really, really likes his parents.
It's all kinds of Freudian slip-ups here.
It's something, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see, where do we go now?
Kaoru's harmonics test.
Oh, is that what happened next?
Well,
was this before or after we have the conversation about
with Rei?
The Marduk Institute with Misato on the bridge.
Okay, so we kind of jump back past that a little bit, where she's talking about no background info on him. Are you talking about where she's like watching him through the binoculars?
Yeah. While we're doing that, well, it's not her solo. It's her and the other guy.
Glasses.
Nerve. Yeah. And they're talking about him, kind of hacking the system to find out where Rasuko is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, that's where we are. And then after that goes into the first sync rate test for Kaoru. So yeah, this is at that point here. So at that sync rate test, Kaoru is just effortlessly crushing everything. They don't even have to change. Even Futsuki is kind of amazed because they don't even have to change out the core of Unit 2, which is like specially set to the previous pilot. And Kaoru is just effortlessly doing this. He looks completely zen sitting in the cockpit, and he's scoring just impossibly high. Like they can't even comprehend it. And it's like, you think about it this way, like Asuka trained from the time she was basically 5 to 15, so 10 years roughly, training, doing all this stuff. Shinji, supposedly a prodigy, which we kind of know now he had a little bit of a cheating advantage, if you want to say, being that his mother was the Eva. It's kind of like, that seems like an unfair advantage. That's why I said like Asuka being so tormented that Shinji surpassed her. I'm like, she didn't even realize it was never a fair game. Like if it was a competition with Shinji. But yeah, Kaoru is just like blowing past him, like completely leaving him in the dirt, where Shinji doesn't even have a prayer of matching anything like that. And that just all makes Misato even more suspicious. But she's like, when everyone else is just like losing their minds, she's just like, yeah, we just have to accept the facts as they are, and then we'll try to make sense of them later. But like right now, we can't be saying, well, this is impossible. It's just like, no, the numbers say what the numbers say. We just have to like acknowledge that and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, at this point too, I was looking up. So I know about Lilith, but I did want to see. I've never heard the term Lilin before.
Mm-hmm.
So my immediate idea was, okay, well, this is just a child of Lilith. But when I was looking into it a little bit more, just like a definition on Lilin, they're talking about Lilins were hostile night spirits that attacked men in ancient Mesopotamia religion and Jewish folklore, which I mean just lines up with Lilith being like the evil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's like I wish that conversation came up a little bit later.
Yeah.
And that does make sense, with kind of the reveal of what happens with the Avas. But
right,
it's like, man, I wish I had some more time to think about that.
Yeah, Lilith is kind of like the. I mean, there's some mysticism where she's more or less presented as if she's the mother of demons, and I was like, oh, so here in a minute when we get into like our huge revelation, if you want to boil down like the background plot of Evangelion, when we get to that conversation coming up here in a minute, that doesn't present humanity in the best light, does it? Like if we're descended there. So yeah. I also liked this conversation we get before that one, where we have Rei 3 ascending an escalator, and she's stunned by the sight of Kaoru. Like, there's genuine surprise just seeing someone else that looks kind of like her, the gray hair, the red eyes, pale skin, all of that. And he's just like, yo, first children, what's up? Like, he's just trying to make small talk or whatever. And it has very much that, like, how do you do, young kids or fellow young kids, that sort of thing. He's just like, oh, it looks like we're built the same, and we've settled on a similar body type as the Lilin to survive in this world. And I like how as he's going on, basically could not be spelling it out more clear of like, we are not like them. Ray's still just like, I'm sorry, who are you? It was just like, I was just like, damn it, Ray, either you're not listening or your sass levels are way higher than I expected Ray 3 to be at. It was just a funny thing. He's just spelling it out, and she just immediately is like, "Yeah, okay, check yourself." But yeah, it's not the Ray answer you would expect, but I guess you could say it's a sign that even though it's the third iteration of Ray, it's a sign of growth, maybe.
Growth in what sense?
Yeah.
Growth in that she's becoming more normal.
Maybe. I mean, we talked about this before, like with each iteration, how much of the original soul is still left or intact or whatever. And we do seemingly have a glimpse that has some sort of awareness of previous selves and all of that. So we know she's wrestling with this idea of like, why is she continually being brought back? We know she has great affection for Gendo, but now we're seeing that resentment towards Gendo as well, where she doesn't understand almost like why he won't let her rest. And so it's like building in this anger, her nearly smashing the glasses in her hand last episode. So yeah, I feel like we are seeing growth, even if she doesn't fully understand everything that, is motivating it. It seems to be like almost like an echo of like that awareness of past lives, maybe. Don't know. That's just a theory. Then we cut to Gendo's office. He learns of Kaoru and Rei's meeting, which, again, when you know to recontextualize this as what it is later, it's kind of like, oh, that should have felt more significant, probably, given the two spirits involved. And Gendo seems kind of actually legitimately curious about their meeting. Like it kind of seems like I don't think Gendo is like the one pulling strings on this. I think it's the council basically, and Gendo is even kind of like not flummoxed, but he's like, all right, interesting. Like he doesn't seem like he's fully in control of this. Maybe he's like suspicious of something, but I don't think he's like fully on to what's happening, let alone what the counter move would be.
Yeah, this is definitely the first time that it feels like that too, because Gendo always feels like he's the one in charge, and this is the first time we kind of see him taking a loss at the chess piece.
Yep. While all this is going on, the Magi is trying to process everything and learn more about Kaoru as well. It really doesn't know what to make of them, and it's basically setting up for there's going to be a confrontation soon as it's trying to process this. We then go to Misato, who's now confronting Risuko, and I love how... Wait, has that happened yet?
I don't know. my next
No,
part.
her going to Shinji's room. I got ahead of myself. You want to pick it up?
Have we passed the shower scene already?
That hasn't happened yet. It's very soon. We smash cut to Misato trying to go to Shinji's room. Now Shinji's got the note basically saying that he's away, and she just has this quick little moment of like, oh, so Shinji also hasn't come back yet either, huh? I'm a failure as a guardian, aren't I? And it's like, yes, bitch, yes, you are. You're a monumental failure as a guardian. You have failed not one, but both, including the one you coddled somehow. Unbelievable. Then we're going to get to that scene you were talking about. So it's Central Dogma. Shinji's waiting patiently by the elevator, clearly waiting for Kaoru to return from his harmonics training or test, whatever. And he tries to play it off, but he's blushing. Like it's like it could not be more obvious that you were waiting for him, dude. Like, it's fine. Just tell him you like him, Shinji. We get it. We've already had some suspicions that you might be kind of in that range of like into guys or girls potentially, but you've confirmed it. It's fine. Go do whatever you want to do. And this whole exchange, it's so weirdly direct. Like, it's kind of a thing with like Evangelion fans where it's like Kaoru is, for a character who only appears in one episode, is like obscenely popular in the fan base. Like the amount of fan art off him, you would assume he was there for as much, if not more, of the series than Asuka, basically. And there always seems to be like a flirtatious undertone when he's talking with Shinji, and there's a reason for that. But I don't want to get into allegories or anything yet. So yeah, so Kaoru talking with Shinji, he's kind of just like, oh, you're just waiting here. And Shinji's like, yeah, there's not really anything left to do. I just kind of, I guess, shower and then head home. Nothing really, I don't even really like being home these days, though. And Kaoru is just like, oh, well, you should be happy you have a home to return to. And he's like, well, do you mind if I join you in the shower? And Shinji's like, what, together? And it's just like, yeah, they're going to go sit in a bath. It's got to be a dub thing. They say shower. They're clearly just sitting in like a giant hot bath or something. It looks like half size of a swimming pool. Thing's ginormous. But I have the Kaoru quote here. He says, you go to extremes to avoid making first contact. Are you afraid of intimacy with others? If you keep clear of other people, then you won't be betrayed. You can avoid hurting each other, but you won't stop feeling lonely. No one can be eternally free of loneliness because a person is ultimately alone, but people can live on by being able to forget. And everything Kaoru says is either a flirtatious innuendo or waxing philosophical about just like the difficulties of humanity and like existence in general. And it's just like, it's such a trip hearing anything he says, because it's got to be like some deep analysis of like reason or philosophy, or it's got to come across as almost like, oh, you sure we're not showering together or something? Like, what? It's just a whiplash to me a little bit.
Yeah, I found it weird they didn't hide the angel thing a little bit more, because I feel like they try to do that so much, and it's like, oh, last minute angel attack. But yeah, this guy, I mean, you know from the second he's on screen pretty much that he's an angel, but it still kind of feels like they're trying to reveal it at the end. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, this scene, so there's a scene in the shower while they're in like the little bathtub area where he reaches over and holds Shinji's hand. Yep. Is this the scene that we're talking about in relation to Misato holding his hand? Or is
I think it's supposed to mirror that a little bit. In fact, not in like okay. Are you talking about like in a sexual advance way? That argument?
Like, is this where people are saying like, oh, see, this is kind of an advance?
No. That's not here yet. That one is still a Misato thing. This is meant to mirror it in just that Misato tried to take Shinji's hand and comfort him, and he jerked away and was like, leave me alone. But again, he's so disarmed by Kaoru, he's still blushes, still kind of like, whoa, but he's not like pulling away and like closing himself off or anything. But yeah, Kaoru's shooting his shot, it seems like. He's definitely making his advance and his intentions a little bit known here. And then, of course, the lights shut off, so Shinji's like, oh, must be closing time already. Guess all that's left to do is go home and go to bed. And again, Kaoru's like, oh, with you? And it's just like, God, dude, dial it back. Like, you met him this afternoon. You're so abrasive, so forward in your assumptions here. And Shinji's like, no, dude, like, I'm sure you have an apartment or something somewhere.
That's your own room.
And yet, where does Shinji go? He stays at Kaoru's. Like, Shinji, like, I guess the move works for Kaoru because Shinji does end up crashing that night. Granted, Shinji sleeps on the floor. The overhead shot makes it seem maybe like it's the same bed, but I think he's just on the floor next to him because Kaoru is like, I should be the one on the floor. And Shinji's like, nah, man. Like, I made you, like, let me stay over, basically. So, no, you got the bed, I got the floor. But even before they get to that, Kaoru is just kind of saying, like, oh, I see. Humans live in, here's the quote, humans live with a constant feeling of pain in their hearts, but their hearts are sensitive to pain, so it makes living difficult. Their hearts are delicate like glass, yours especially. And Shinji's basically just like, oh, really? You think so? So here's a very hotly contended part of the quote from Kaoru, and it's probably the best example of why people were so pissed off at the Netflix dub. Kaoru says, you are worthy of my grace. The caption says affection, but when Shinji's kind of like, wait, worthy of your grace or your affection? He's like, I'm saying I like you. The Japanese dub and every other English dub is, I'm saying I love you. And so people were thinking, okay, the context of like versus love is oceans difference. And so it makes sense why love would have a greater impact on Shinji. He's never had anyone tell him, he says later, he's never had anyone tell him they loved him and that they saw him, accepted him, all of that. It's everything Shinji ever wanted someone to say to him, treat him, all of that. Kaoru is checking all the boxes, basically. And so there were people who felt like it was a little bit of like, I don't know if gay erasure is the right word, but at the very least toned down. And so that was something that people were really mad with the Netflix dub over. And I never really heard a valid excuse, because sometimes you're like, you can make a change that makes something a little clearer or maybe helps it regionalize a little better. I don't think this one made sense. Like, if this was Netflix doing this in like 2008 or something, or 10 even, you'd be like, yeah, okay. They're just trying to be careful with it as far as like the acceptance from Western audiences. 2019 when they released the Evangelion dub for Netflix. No, I don't think that was something they had to worry about or run from. So I don't know why they made that call, but Kaoru is saying, you're worthy of my grace. I'm saying I love you. So
I feel like they do that with a lot of things. I mean, I wouldn't contain it to just this moment. There are a number of things that they tone down the language on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just take like Rasuko's conversation with Gendo versus subtitles. One is very like sexual in nature, whereas the other is like more implications.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they do spell it out, but in a much softer way than the subtitles do.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is specifically, but it definitely seems like they tone down a lot of those type of moments.
It's selective. Like there's moments like they don't run very much from like the occasional moment of intense gore or something, but they also will have like background like moaning as people are having sex or something. And it's just like, I know you're not giving a slopping sound effect, but you're still showing that. And I feel like that is more like risque, even not shown directly, as opposed to like, I'm saying I love you and it just happens to be a guy talking to a guy, but it is what it is. So we get to a mid-title or mid-roll title card, and then we're jumping into Seele talking about sending Kaoru to force Gendo's hand, even acknowledging it's a risky game. Gendo, meanwhile, is standing before Unit 1, and he's speaking. He's kind of actually reflecting on this. Like, you can tell Gendo, who's been so mysterious this whole time, like he's at the precipice of his plan even, and he's talking to Unit 1, and he's basically making, and it's obvious at this point, but no uncertain terms, he's basically saying like, soon, Yui, we'll be together soon. Like they're at this point, and he acknowledges that the Spear of Longinus was a threat to his plan, but they've gotten rid of that. They've cast it away. So there is not much else standing in Gendo's way at this point. And you can see kind of his eagerness, I guess, as he's at this precipice, which I thought was a nice little moment, just because we're not used to seeing him almost having to like convince himself or psych himself up a little bit.
Yeah, and then we get right to his hand, which is like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So he's got an angel in his hand.
Not just an angel, a very specific angel.
Yes. So this is Adam in his hand. And we had a discussion on this, and I wasn't sure at the time until I really reflected on the episode and where everything was, which angel this was. But yes, this is Adam, and he has somehow fused it into his skin, which is pretty gross.
Very gross. So Kaji, if you remember in episode 8, delivered the embryonic remains of Adam. And we've been thinking this whole time what's in the basement is Adam. In fact, they're still not even telling you definitively it's not Adam at this point. And so you're like, huh. And now Gendo has somehow like grafted Adam, the embryonic remains, like into his palm. And you think about it, you're like, wait a minute. Gendo badly burned his hand early in the series. I think it was Ray 5 or 6. We saw a flashback. And we saw his hands at one point. They were scarred. Now all of a sudden we're seeing this is on his hands. And you're like, well, he's been wearing gloves all series long and sitting like this, always kind of guarding that right hand. Oh, and the palm is where this thing is. I think as soon as Kaji brought Gendo the remains of Adam, I think Gendo grafted it to his hand, and the gloves had a cover story because of the burns. And so every time we've seen Gendo, he's sitting here like this. I think he's literally just almost shielding, covering, protecting like his ultimate trump card. Because even, and this is where it gets into a little bit of confusion of who knows what. And I guess we'll get into that in a minute. But I think this is Gendo's trump card. And I don't know who knows, not like, obviously I think only maybe Fusky knows about his gloves. But like, I think Sele has a different understanding or a different belief of what's in the basement versus Kaoru, who they're sending. Like, figuring out the who thinks what can get confusing at times. Like, who thinks what when. So we'll get to that in a moment. But the flash of Adam is like a second, like a millisecond.
And this is where I'm questioning, like, okay, and I think we haven't even gotten fully into that conversation yet, but maybe I'm wrong. But I'm questioning to myself, which angels are the good angels and which angels are the bad angels? And I'm still at this point trying to figure out, are all of the angels that are coming down, and I think this is where I'm thinking at this point, are they really coming from heaven or wherever we think they are coming from, or is Gendo also responsible for this? Which I don't think he is, looking back at the episode now, but something I was questioning at this point.
Yeah, valid question. I don't have offhand like a good answer I can give. Then we got from there, I don't care about Pin Pin. I know Pin Pin is wildly popular. He's just like a little dopey mascot. Misato's having to not let him go. She's giving him to someone else to go live with someone else because the recent destruction of the city is getting too close to her apartment. And she's just like, it's just not safe being here. Plus, like, kind of everyone else is already gone. No one's really there to look after you. So probably just better you stay with someone else. I didn't care about Pin Pin going away, but I'm
Ray
sure.
Was also questioning. She makes a statement about being questioning why she's been brought back or for who. I mean, we know the answer to that. It's Gendo. It's always Gendo, and it's always Gendo's plan.
Yep. But now we move from there to the Shinji Kaoru sleepover. Yeah. And the actual plot, essentially, of the series. Do you want to lead on that, and then I'll jump in with the full spelled out explanation from Kaoru?
Sure, I'll give you what I got. I might skip over some things that you have. But.
Sure.
So Shinji starts opening up to Kaoru, like way beyond what he does with normal people, which just leads even more into like, oh yeah, definitely his dad, because that's the only person he seems to have this like weird affection for that's, allows him to at least access some of these emotions and feelings that he has.
Yeah.
But Kaoru makes a comment saying that he's born just to meet Shinji.
He's landed on thick.
Yeah, he's laying it on really thick.
It's like, dude, he's already staying in your room tonight. Like, you don't got to keep playing this card.
Yeah, and then there's a conversation about, let's see, Karu's not taking, let's see, dear Lord, what am I writing here? I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Some conversation about Sele.
Okay, so
To be a destroyed city. I think this is when Karu's talking outside of the scene. So
yeah, the sleepover thing is already wrapped up. It's the morning after. Kaoru he got up like early in the morning, wandered out into the wreckage of the city, and he's looking out over one of the Lake Ashis, and the markers from Sele are there, which is confusing because Misato, we find out, is watching this from a distance, but she doesn't see them. So I'm like, is this like telepathic? How is this happening? But
I'm glad I'm not the only one questioning that, because I was like, is he wearing contacts or something that
yeah,
you can see this? But at the end of it, I kind of got that it was more for us than anything else. Like maybe he's got an earpiece in and he's listening to this conversation, but it's not, or maybe he doesn't even need one. I mean, gosh, we're thinking within the bounds of like how a human would interact with Sailor.
I mean, think of him seeing Misato. She's miles away, and she's like, "Did he see me? There's no fucking way he saw me."
So but he could be in the room with the council right now,
sure.
and in the location he is. two places at once, because we can't really comprehend what his abilities are at this point.
Yep. So here's the back and forth with Kaoru and Sele. Kaoru says, or it said, "Men cannot create something from nothing. Man has to turn to something else in order to accomplish anything. Man isn't a god after all." The Sele markers are then kind of answering like, yes, but there is a man who endeavors to wield the power equal to that of a god. There is a man other than us who intends to lift the lid from Pandora's box once more. And it's like, I love how Sele talks, because one giant marker will talk and then another one appears to like piggyback off of what he says, and then another one appears, and then another one appears. I'm like, can one person just have like a paragraph, or do we have to be like, everyone get one sentence just so we feel like we can justify having however many members we have? There's a man scheming to slam shut the box before the hope at the bottom can appear. And Karu kind of laughs at that notion. He's like, hope? That's the hope of he's like, the hope of the Lilin. And that's a good point, because it's like, it's kind of like acknowledging like we're all admitting like, I'm not Lilin, which is interesting that Sele is like working with him then. But like we're all like we're clear that I'm not Lilin. So like when you talk about hope, like it's the hope from your perspective. The Lilin's idea of hope is what the caption says to make it a little more clear. And he says, Sele answers, hope exists in as many forms as there are people. For hope only exists within the confines of a man's heart. But our hope has already manifested itself. We, humanity, the usurping successors who arose from the black moon, our progenitor is Lilith, and the angels, the true successors who rose from the now lost white moon, their progenitor, that's a hard word, is Adam. The soul which was salvaged from Adam has been embodied in you. So a lot to take. And then they also add, however, Adam's restored flesh has been embedded within Gendo Akari. So they know about Gendo having Adam. And I'm like, I would like to know how they know that. We didn't know that until 5 minutes ago. But that
I didn't even catch that piece.
So yeah, it's the last thing they say there. So yes, a lot to take in here, but Adam is his descendants are supposed to be the true inheritors of Earth. Now, background context, and this is going to reference again a modern sci-fi movie. Prometheus, the engineers at the beginning. This concept comes from Evangelion. Seeds of life sent out across the universe. Adam was sent first to Earth, but did not awaken for some reason. Somehow, I don't know the reason of why didn't awaken. I'm unclear if Lilith was sent as a replacement one, let's try that one again, or if it was Lilith was supposed to be sent to, let's say, Mars, but went off course and crashed on Earth. But Lilith woke up and was able to start creating life on Earth. Humanity comes along and eventually discovers, I guess in 2000, if the Birth of Nerve episode tells us, in 2000 discovers the chasm, whatever, of the White Moon, which is basically the impact site for where Adam was in the Antarctic, and awakens Adam. That begins the rise of the angels, and they are supposed to be the true inheritors of the Earth, which is why their DNA is so similar to humanity's. But humanity was born from Lilith, the second seed of life that came to the planet. They basically usurped Adam and his descendants, not because of their fault or anything, but that was just the happenstance of how that all came about. But when the second impact happened, the White Moon was lost, and the Black Moon, which is the geofront we know now, is all that remains, essentially. That's a lot of lore to be buried in there, and some of that even required supplemental research from other official outlets to fill the gaps.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you got all of that. And I want to go back more towards a biblical reference to Lilith, even though that's, the show's obviously taking a different direction. Mm-hmm. But I did think this line in something I was researching where they were talking about Lilith is cited as having been banished from the Garden of Eden for not complying with Adam, which if you think of it in the biblical sense, Adam is influenced, and I realize Eve is not a part of Evangelion, but
they're one and the same. Remember, Lilith and Eve are one and the same. In Jewish mysticism, it's Lilith is the first wife of Adam, and Catholic, I think, and Christian, it's Eve.
They're the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Interchangeable.
I don't
basically
know as much about Lilith as I think I do. So, anyways, I don't even know where I was going with
Sorry, I interrupted train of thought.
No, it's fine. No, that's that pushes me along past that. So, we had this conversation probably like the day after maybe about this Black Moon, White Moon, mm-hmm. And in relation to the facilities that are being used, where we have the primary and the backup facilities. Do we want to get into that a little bit?
Well, it's not like the backup facility. The old one is at the White Moon. The White Moon was destroyed in the Antarctic during the second impact. But the Nerve HQ and the geofront, all of that is the Black Moon, which is why it's almost this like almost biodome type thing, like within the Earth that can like support atmosphere and do all of this. It's like the seed of life, essentially, like the impact zone of where Adam or Lilith arrived. And so like all of this area around it like thrives. So you have like its full sustaining ecosystem and everything. You have oceans and everything, even though you're underground, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah. They use the word usurper a lot in their conversation, which, if you don't know what that means, it's a person who takes position of power or importance illegally or by force. So we are to assume that Lilith kind of did this without permission, I guess? Are we to assume that she was supposed to wake Adam and instead decided to create life herself?
I think it's as simple as that humanity are the usurpers in this case, because we weren't supposed to inherit this, but we sort of cut in front of someone that was supposed to. Because since Adam never awoke originally when he landed on Earth, his line didn't start. And so when Lilith arrived, she did wake up and did start, producing life on the planet, which eventually led to us. And so it's like we usurped them when they were the rightful heirs to the planet. That's what I take from it. I don't know that it's like you never know anything of like Adam's conscious thing. Like, I guess you could say like the revelation we had earlier that Adam's soul is apparently in Kauru.
Which is confusing.
Yes.
Because we had this whole thing with the gates of Guff with Rey and talking about the gates of Guff being empty while transferring Rey's soul.
Yes.
But now we have somehow found a way to do this with Adam, which I wish they would expand upon that a little bit more.
We know Rey was the last one that emptied the chamber of Guff, but we know Kaoru was born on the day of the second impact. So maybe there was more material, more souls or whatever to imbue. And so his soul was put into the vessel that became Kaoru, and Rey was the result of numerous cloning attempts. Mankind, again, making an artificial human to try and replicate Adam. So it's like they are the same, but they're not identical. Just like.
So do we think that Kaoru has been alive this whole time, like in a chamber somewhere, or?
I don't know. That's something that's not explored by the original series. So I don't know what
it should be.
Yeah, I agree. Again, we're at the point where we're starting to get to murkier water because the production is getting rushed at this point, especially by episode 24. So I agree, should be. So Kaoru is the reincarnation, essentially, of Adam, complete with soul. And the other revelation of this is Lilith's soul has also been revived. Interesting there. We'll get in with that. Let's see. Is there anything else in that conversation? Sele just telling Adam they entrust him with their wish, which is an interesting thing. I think it's just like their goal, their aspirations they're putting on him, even though they know it's a risky thing to do. Because again, you're sending literally the reincarnation of Adam into Dogma Terminal or whatever, Terminal Dogma, to try and get to what we believe is the physical body of Adam minus the flesh. It's like we get so confusing with this. It's like Ava Unit 2 is sort of an Adam. It's made of Adam. You have the body at the bottom of Terminal Dogma, we're told, is Adam's physical body. You have Adam's soul reincarnated, and Kaoru is just like, how do we have three Adams here in a way? And somehow we're not going to, it gets more confusing as you look to future iterations and stuff, but I digress.
My question is so after we talked, the goal here is that the soul of Adam will be reunited with the body, which is going to cause the third impact. But
it's kind of like completing Adam. The soul meets the body.
What is Sele's play with that?
They want to trigger human instrumentality. And so I think their pitch to Kaoru would have been, we'll let you complete your soul, reunite the soul with the body, and in exchange, our goal of you will carry out our goal of human instrumentality. I think that's the pitch.
What is the goal of human instrumentality?
They haven't said yet, but it will be explored. So, and it's one of those things too, just like we were talking about Prometheus earlier, where you're going to be like, oh, okay, I've seen that concept in another thing since then. Yes, since then being the key word. But Kaoru basically just kind of acknowledges them putting all of this hope and everything in him. And he's like, yeah, I think that's, I already knew all that. And I think it's why I've come to be here at this moment, essentially, like as if his destiny is essentially coming to this moment. And yeah, that's where you have then Misato spying on him from a distance. And
I think we also have a conversation about the sync rates too, right? That he can change. I have something here in the notes before we get to Rasuko in Nerve Holding, that Kaoru can change his sync rates with Ava, the Ava pretty much whenever he wants.
Yes.
Which is, that makes sense with where we are earlier. I just thought that was like a good thing to hear from them as far as like why that sync was so easy.
Yep.
Which is really pulling together like why Rey has been so good at this in the past and able to, I guess we're not able to operate multiple Avas at this point, but I noticed something on the background which I didn't notice the first time I was looking at it, was the Rasuko and Nerve Holding, the background said, "God's in heaven, all is right in the world," which I thought was like a cool little tidbit to throw in there.
Yeah, they're almost tagline. Yeah. Yes, and you're correct about the sync rate thing. That's a good thing to mention in there as well. Misato going to to Risuko, basically not caring that there's cameras, and she's just like straight up just like, yeah, tell me about the kid. Like, I don't care if someone's watching. Tell me what he is and what he means. And Risuko basically is just like, oh, he's probably the final messenger. And it's just like, that sounds ominous and infuriatingly vague at the same time. And right on cue, Kaoru activates Unit 2, first walking over water and then just kind of like disappearing and reappearing right in front of it. And Unit 2 turns on without him even having to get in the entry plug, in the cockpit, nothing. He's literally just like floating alongside it, and it just like activates, and it's smashing out of its containment. And it finally, the Magi figures out what to call him. It's like, oh yeah, my bad. Yeah, it's a code blue. Sorry. I've been trying to figure this out for a few days. Sorry, a day. He's been here a day at this point.
Yeah, and he makes a comment too. So Unit 2 is referred to as Adam's alter ego and Lillian's loyal servant, which this is really where we get the revelation, which I didn't get initially until we started talking, is that is why there is a difference between Unit 0, Unit 1, and Unit 2, because Unit 0 and 1 are Lillian, Unit 2 is Adam, which is why he is able to, well, part of the reason why he is able to take control of that Ava. The other part is the fact that it is devoid of a soul at this point, because the sync rate with Asuka has pretty much gotten that Ava to the point where anyone can take over because it's no longer synced, which is something we had similar to... this is really the first time we get the revelation on why Rei wasn't able to operate Unit 1 when she tried to take over for Shinji after that whole event happened. She's saying, oh, well, it's too late for that now because she can't operate it because it's bonded with Shinji's soul at this point. But right now we have an empty vessel of an Ava. Which is cool.
Yeah. And like you said, you hit the nail on the head. Unit 2 of Adam, that's why he can pilot it. And because Asuka's sync rate with it hit 0, it's like it's almost like factory reset, essentially. It's not synced with her. He's just like, oh, I can pilot it now, or I can basically bend it to my will. Again, he doesn't have to physically pilot it, which is the crazy thing. And so as he's descending into Central Dogma, Futsuki and operations are scrambling to try and block his path. Gendo and Futsuki are very clearly surprised by this. Futsuki says, I never thought Seele would send an angel into the heart of HQ, to which Gendo says, the old men have found a way to skip a step, and they're using us to do it for them, which, again, very ominous here. It's a whole new meaning to bring in the fight to you. It's like, all right, well, we're going to try and do our thing. Maybe it'll fail, but if it fails, at least you're not going to succeed. Like, it's basically putting everything on them. It's like, yep, we have our plans, but we're willing to blow up the whole damn thing if it means you don't win.
I'm loving it at this point too, because as much as it's, we've seen Gendo be in power this whole time, as we were talking earlier, it's kind of the first time we see a pawn get taken off of his board. But this really, at this point, is like, wow, they're good. They're not just like, the second to, gosh, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but they're of equal measure at this point, I would say, in that Gendo is not only surprised, he's got to figure out how to handle this situation, really unprepared. He doesn't seem terribly freaked out because he doesn't ever elicit that type of emotion.
They're showing themselves to be a valid or an equal foe. It doesn't look like they're the unwitting idiots that he's just manipulating. Suddenly they're throwing a counterpunch that has him knocked back on his heels, and you're like, oh, this is a fight between kind of equals here. Like, it's a fair fight. It's not just him toying with them the whole way. Yeah. Let's see here. So Seele then kind of commenting says, man has forgotten their foolishness and repeats the mistakes of the past. Another Seele thing. Man will never change without first making atonements. A third one. We do not need Adam, nor do we need the angels. We'll employ our means in order to transform the future. Let us hope Unit 1 will be able to carry out the task. So like I said, they're like, we'll burn this bitch to the ground before we let Gendo Ikari have his wish. And that's the idea of a wish is when we hit this pivotal moment, whatever this moment is amounting to, whether it's an impact, whether it's instrumentality, whatever it is, whoever is in the driver's seat will be able to shape the course forward. Like whether it's human history, whether it's the universe, whatever, like it's like almost like you can bend reality at that point, but you have to be in that driver's seat. And so they've been kind of jockeying for this position this whole time. And there's like, we'll just let everything cease to be if that's what it means to keep him from winning, just because at this point they're petty enough to be like, no, screw this guy.
Yeah, and he finally, Gendo finally unleashes the Kraken, so Unit 1 is out and has the license to kill at this point.
Yep.
Because he said to use any means necessary to prevent the target from entering terminal dogma, which is really when we first get to see like what it looks like, I guess, which is very interesting. It looks like being on the moon in space almost when they finally get down to it.
Yeah. And this would have been like the immediate impact zone of where, specifically of where the seed of life would have landed. So like that's why like almost reality around this part in particular almost seems like alien, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, Masato is asking why it used Unit 2. We already know the answer to that. And then Futsuki is guessing that it wants to meld itself with it, which it kind of does.
Yeah.
And then I just wrote, well, Shinji's got to kill his boyfriend.
Yeah. And think about this, too. Like, again, this mirrors the scene in which Shinji, when it came to Toji, the fourth children, he could not bring himself to fight him. Not just to kill him. He couldn't bring himself to, like, raise his hands against him. And this, like, he likes Toji. Toji is a friend of his. Not even close to how connected he feels to Kaoru. Yeah. And, like, at first he's just furious and distraught hearing, like, his mission orders, basically. He's like, you're wrong. It's impossible. You can't be right. And Misato's just like, almost like, I don't know where this anger is coming from, but it's the facts. You got to accept that and go deal with it now. Like everything is riding on you. And so
he
like,
seems more pissed with himself too, just for like letting it happen almost. It's like, man, how did I let this person in and like feel these feelings for somebody and not know better that this was, you know, an enemy at this point.
Yep.
Which at this point I'm also questioning, was this whole thing, you know, just to play off of Shinji's emotions in order to protect itself, which it wasn't.
Yeah. I see why you would think that. Yeah. Yes. So Shinji first before Shinji's talking about like angrily, he's heading that direction. Kaoru is almost like looking up, like he's like noting kind of that Shinji's like late, like, I don't know, like what's the holdup? You know, like it's almost like he again understands like this is their destiny to meet at this moment, whatever direction it takes. Like he knows that they're supposed to have this this interaction, whatever it's going to be here. And then on cue, here comes Shinji just like screaming basically down, charging down after him. And he says, you betrayed me. You betrayed the trust I put in you. You betrayed me just like my father, or just like father. And then we get kind of an interesting fight that we never really thought we would see. Unit 1 and Unit 2 in a knife fight. That was like, hell yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, the fight was awesome. And I love the fact that he's just like floating outside of the Ava the whole time this is going on. It's a really like cool visual, and it definitely shows kind of like the power dynamic at this point. It's like you are fighting a game that you cannot win at this point, which, I mean, we'll get into that later.
Yep.
But he definitely can make things happen way beyond Shinji's ability at this point.
Yep. And Shinji's kind of asking like why he's doing this. He's asking himself, why are you doing this? And Kaoru says, it's because the Ava and I share similar qualities. We were both born of offspring of Adam. So if it is empty of soul, I can merge with it. And Unit 2 has conveniently withdrawn its soul within itself. There's more to that. Not that it's like game changing, but it is an interesting, insightful thing that will be revealed later. Basically, they're just going about this knife fight. I like the moment where Unit 1's prog knife is deflected towards Kaoru, and like he blocks it with an AT field. Again, hands are in his pocket. He could not be less, intimidated by the situation. He's not scared of anything. He's not like, oh, that was close. He's just like, just smiling, hands in the pocket. He's like telling Shinji. Shinji's like, what? An AT field? And now I almost said Adam. And Kaoru's like, yeah, that is the Lilith term for it, I guess. The sacred realm that's impervious to others, the light of the heart. Deep down, the Lilith must know the AT fields are the inner walls everyone has within them. And I like that Shinji's almost like, how the fuck should I know that? It's just like, yeah, dude, I would be so annoyed if I'm like in a fight for my entire species, like future fight for my own life. And I'm just like annoyed and like pissed off, and you're over here just like giving me like a very spiritual lesson here, like, oh, the walls within our heart. Really, that is all an AT field is, just in a physical manifestation. Like, shut up! It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that at this point.
Yeah. At the command center, Misato tells Glasses that if things go south, go ahead and trigger the self-destruct. Glasses is like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And I know, and it's fine because I'm here with you. And, we've speculated before. We thought he had some kind of feelings for her. And we said, like, Misato does tend to weaponize her sexuality to an extent. I'm not saying anything like that happened there, but like I think she absolutely knew he had feelings of some sort and just kind of strung him along to help her do all of her stuff. So it's kind of like weaponizing your own character flaw while knowing and detesting yourself for that flaw. And that mirrors what they've been saying about the Avas on a broader level, humanity having to weaponize the very things that threaten their existence in order to try and survive. So cool microcosm of that there, just a small parallel. There seems to be a huge explosion, massive AT field blinding the command center. Like they can't see any of the data, anything going on. They're blind basically to the confrontation at this point. There will be no outside interference. And it's just like, ooh, okay, so now they can't even give Shinji like instructions. Like the prog knife, I think, was Misato telling him to weaponize that, if I recall. And now he's completely on his own down there, and that doesn't seem like a good thing at all.
Yeah, and the final safety systems are disabled now, and I believe Heaven's door is opening up.
Knocking.
The Angel has made it to its goal at this point.
Yep. And I like how, as Kaoru is like floating towards the door that's now unlocked, Unit 1 and Shinji are trying to go after it, and Unit 2 is like laying on the ground, still grabbing at its ankle. Like, no, you're predisposed until you like kill this thing, basically. I'll
there's we get to the point where they're talking about an AT field of equal magnitude, where I'm like, oh, okay, that's Ray's, obviously.
Yep.
But it's odd to me that this has never come up before. Why does her AT field just now activate, or why have they just now noticed this for the first time? Because she doesn't seem hostile at this point. Like she's just kind of like watching from overhead.
Yeah, my takeaway from this, and again, there's 2 episodes left, but my takeaway from this is that Ray has not known much about what she is or why she is anything. And I think it was when she met Kaoru for the first time that she started to question things. She knows, like, okay, we're similar. And then once he reveals what he is, she kind of, I think, puts together that maybe she's similar. And so it's almost like looking within yourself and finding this like truth or knowing or something. And so she's basically trying to counteract his AT field with her AT field, which allows, I guess, some measure of accessibility or something, where Shinji's then able to defeat Unit 2, I guess. I don't know if that is happening because of Ray's interference or lack of interference, just her presence, or what exactly. That's what I'm unsure of, is like the command center registers that it's there, and then just as fast as it shows up, it disappears. And so they're confused by that. I'm not sure. But it serves as a cool introduction for her, just as like, oh, so it was Lilith's soul in Rey this whole time. And it's like, so Rey is a very weird case where you're like, clone of Shinji's mom, partly had the soul of Yui at one point, but also has the soul of Lilith. Okay, interesting. Just a little bit of a loaded vessel, I guess. But right at that moment, you have Shinji crashing through the wall, having defeated Unit 2, and reaches out and, well, first before that, Kaoru
we need
actually
to discuss who
yes.
the creation is.
Yes, Kaoru.
So
you take it.
Yeah. This is not Adam, which is funny that Kaoru really had to. I mean, as you said in our conversation earlier, is he has to really get up onto this thing before he's like, wait, this isn't Adam, this is Lilith, which completely changes the plan. And at this point, I'm still questioning, did he know what to do with this like moment in time? Because originally he was going to fuse back with his body, as we talked about earlier. But now he's presented with, that's not an option anymore. Lilith is here. Is killing Lilith going to be helpful to him? Because I feel in that moment, with the way he kind of interacts with Shinji, and then Shinji, grabs him and he's having a conversation. But I feel that Kaoru is ultimately more powerful, even though Shinji is in the Eva and has him grasped. I feel like he could have avoided that happening, and that maybe Lilith wasn't. Killing Lilith wouldn't have been a beneficial move for Sele at this point, or even just Adam. And that also could come back to the fact that he talks about, Kaoru talks about that he wants Shinji to be alive, essentially.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts at this point?
I definitely think there's something to that. I think that with him, it's a matter of getting down there, refusing with the self, I think would trigger an impact. And you could say from Kaoru's perspective, that would be like fusing back into one. If it causes everything else, humanity, everything else to die, it's like an incidental, it's fallout, it's collateral damage. It's not him directly doing it. It's just his whole thing is just trying to be whole again, essentially. And if it was, once he discovers like, yes, this is Lilith, killing Lilith, one, it wouldn't trigger the impact, but it would take Lilith off the board, where we know humanity, and the angels therefore know humanity, has also been trying to trigger their instrumentality or the impact in order to do instrumentality, whatever. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, well, if he did kill Lilith, he takes their weapon off the board, presumably, right? So there could be benefits there. But I think at that point, yes, he's tricked into going down there, believing that it's Adam, his actual flesh that's down there, and that he'll be able to be complete again. But then I think when he gets there and realizes it's not, I think, okay, this isn't like, this is all just like a manipulative kind of cruel game and everything. No matter what happens, one of our sides is going to have to die, is going to have to be eliminated. And Kaoru has said at this point, he is the last angel. Like, there is no one else from him. Now, if he survives, again, Adam reborn, if you will, fully restored, could restart life then. But I think his takeaway at this point is like, no matter what, our kinds are destined. One side's going to win and the other is going to be completely extinct, basically. And so I think he's just kind of like deciding at this point who that deserves to be. So from Sele's perspective, that's their trump card, is they need, for their plan, the last angel has to be killed by Unit 1. And so they're sending them into conflict, and their risk is mitigated by the fact that he gets down there and nope, it's Lilith down there, not Adam. So he thought he was inches away from winning, and they're like, nope, It's Lilith. It's not compatible with what you're trying to do. The impact will not start if you try to fuse with Lilith. I don't even know what would happen.
So the reason the council didn't tell him is because his motivation was reuniting himself.
Yes.
But they were hoping that the bait and switch would work kind of last minute and that he would change his mind or, be like, okay, well, at least I've got an opportunity to do this.
Yeah. And it's funny because I say, like, I don't even know what would happen. I don't know. I mean to say, I don't know that they're aware of what would happen if Adam and Lilith were fused into one. There is that thought out there, though. There is someone who has considered this possibility. But yeah, so as he's almost weighing this in this moment of confusion, Shinji smashes through the wall with Unit 2, having beaten Unit 2, reaches out, snatches Kaoru in his hand, and he says, I have to thank you, Shinji. I wanted you to stop Unit 2. If you hadn't, it might have continued to live alongside her. Her, I think, is just referring to Lilith. Because I initially was like, is he talking about Asuka? Is he talking about the soul dormant within Unit 2? Well, that can't be it because it's born of Adam. So I was trying to figure out. I think he's just talking about Lilith. I think he doesn't like Lilith in this case, understanding like that's sort of the enemy. And so he's glad that Unit 2 is destroyed rather than living alongside her. Shinji asks again why he's doing it. And he says, because even if it means humanity perishes in the process, fate dictates that I will live on. But I could die here right now in this moment. For me, there is equal value in life and death. Choosing to die is the one and only choice no one can take away from you. And it's just like, as always, laying it on with like the heavy philosophy and everything. Like, okay, sure. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it kind of makes you question at that point too, and I took away more of like, it's a bond that less on, bonded with Lilith and more bonded with just the Ava in general, that like that piece of his soul will always be there as long as that Ava exists.
Yeah.
Which makes you question, like, how is that impacting Shinji? How is that impacting Asuka? And as you said, there's some revelation coming up. And maybe those pieces of your soul that bond with the Ava never are returned to you. Maybe that's something that's always with your Ava. I haven't thought about that much outside of our conversation right now, but
yeah, no, that's interesting. There might even be something in a future thing that lends like as supporting speculative stuff to a greater theories maybe that we get into down the road with the rebuilds. But I like that. It's interesting. Yeah, Shinji's confused why Kaoru Shinji's confused. Kaoru gives basically his final words to make him disappear because, quote, if he doesn't, humanity will disappear. Only one life form can avoid extinction and be granted a future. And I've come to the conclusion that you shouldn't be the one to die. You and your kind need a future. Thank you, Shinji. I'm so happy I could meet you. And then we get the most iconic, long still shot of Evangelion. I told you there's like 4 or 5 of these moments in the series. This is the last one. And honestly, this is the one that probably, like, they always do it for like building out the stress and the tension and everything. This is like 47 seconds or something of this, but I actually love it because not seeing Shinji, not hearing Shinji, you can only imagine how he's like wrestling with his thoughts on what to do here, how to either pull the trigger, so to speak, or not. He's holding Kaoru in his hand. Kaoru has basically accepted his fate. Shinji knows, like, if I don't kill him here, then his side is what's going to win. If I do kill him here, then yes, I'm killing the one person that ever told me he loved me, the only person who's ever like seen me and accepted me as I am, the person who, like, anything Shinji ever felt he needed. There's only been one person that show him that. And literally in like his one day of knowing Shinji, Kaoru has done all of the things that no one ever did in Shinji's life. And that's sad, honestly. And now Shinji has to make this decision. So it's a long, long wait. And it feels like just as soon as you're tempted to glance at your phone, that's when he finally, and Kaoru's head pops off and falls into the lake of LCL. Yeah, a little grisly there.
Was that his head? I couldn't tell if it was his head or his mushed up body.
I think it's his head. Yeah. And there's so we then cut to Gendo and Rei washing over as Unit 1 is cleaned from its encounter. Shinji's out looking basically where he met Kaoru the first time, and he's just talking to Misato, and he's like, basically like saying, hey, Kaoru told me that I was worthy of his grace and that he liked me. But Misato, totally missing like the significance of this moment and everything, she kind of just makes like an assumption of like, no, he didn't really want to live because only those with the will to live can survive. He craved death. He cast aside the will to live and attached himself to a false hope. It's like, yeah, because you're definitely aware of all of this, right? Shinji just rebukes, like, that's cold, Miss Misato. Like, it's just like, yeah, this is not the best Misato episode as far as being good guardian. It's another case where she's just misreading what she needs to tell Shinji in this moment. Like, she thinks she's doing it right, but she's just like, kind of like, nah, he was a coward, basically. Like, that's all right. That's not going to make Shinji feel any better about any of this. Even if you're trying to tell him he did the right thing, that's not going to help Shinji at all.
Yeah, her response felt very, like, not aware of the situation, for sure.
Yep. Now, the last two episodes, 25 and 26, it's basically a two-parter. It is the ending world and the beast that shouted "I" at the heart of the world. Now, something to consider here. 25, 26 take place just a brief moment after what we just watched in 24. I think it's within the days after. They're controversial. But then you get, I don't know if retcon is the correct word with the end of Evangelion. It's not that it's a retcon, because you can point to a moment where 25, 26 would slot in, but it's kind of like the end of Evangelion picks up right on the heels of where 24 ends, even though we see between 24 and 25, there is a gap. So it's like it retcons that tiny little piece. And then you could even say 24, 25, or sorry, 25, 26 slot in elsewhere. Like into the movie. So it's a little bit of that correction when I went back and looked at it ahead of this recording. But essentially 25, 26 is the original ending that Anno had in mind. And they're controversial. There are a lot of people who are not fans. Then eventually about a year and a half later, we got the end of Evangelion movie, which is like, all right, you didn't feel like you saw enough of what you wanted? I'm going to give you this, and you're going to regret ever asking me for a goddamn thing. It's pretty wild, but yeah, it's going to be interesting looking at these next two episodes. I mentioned earlier with his production process how he really had a good grasp on like somewhere between episode 6 and really 19, and then his production got rushed towards the end. Mm-hmm. Well, the latest thing I find, and that's not to say there's nothing in 25, 26 of worth. The latest thing I find in researching this is that basically he felt at the end of 24, he had already said everything he wanted to say. And so he decided if he had to make 2 more episodes, first he pitched the idea of literally just stepping out on like a production stage and explaining like the ending and answering these questions. And they were like, no, you can't do that. So then he's like, all right, fine. I got 2 episodes to fill. I'm going to go almost like an experimental art film to go into this. And so they are pretty open for interpretation. You're going to get, it's almost like a deconstruction. And so it's interesting, but I can absolutely 100% understand how if you were watching this series when it first came out and you didn't know, because there wasn't a plan initially, you didn't know that more was coming later, I would be very cross with the ending of the series. Like, whoa, you got all this, and then we're gonna go off into the night with like this. Like, those are cool, but like that's our last step. Would be very frustrating. But if you look at them in now this broader context that now with some distance we have the ability to do, I think they're still very interesting. But as far as Anno is concerned, 24 is really the last of like the core story as far as like the timeline is concerned. So that's where he felt like he had made the last of the revelations and everything he was going to spell out. 25, 26 is almost like a deconstruction essentially from there. So interesting stuff that we've got ahead, but we'll be talking about those. I guess we'll try and film 25 later this week, maybe if we can, Friday. And then we're going to film 26 right before I head into town next Saturday, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. We'll be filming that so that we can prep and watch the end of Evangelion movie.
Sounds good.
Wow, I was wondering, like, how long are we going to talk in this episode? We've been going an hour and 35 minutes. I'm kind of impressed by that, honestly. There's a lot to cover in this episode, but I don't know that I expected an hour and a half. If this was End of Evangelion, I was like, yeah, make that 2.5 hours, but we'll see. So, yeah, this is it for this episode. The end is in sight. Now, as I delay to find my closure note here. There it is. Well, that about does it for today. You may think our take's cheap, but to you we say, whatever, make your own podcast, dweeb. Wow. Rolling it back. I'm trying to roll it back to the 90s when this series was first made, I guess. But yeah, that'll do it for today. We'll be back soon. Until next time, I've been Derek.
I've been Matt.
Later.